So hello everyone. And in the previous video, while having a discussion on Python pandas, we talked about creating a data frame as well as the different attributes that are present that can be applied on a data frame. Now today we are going to discuss about accessing the data from a data frame. That means once you have created your data frame from different sources, we need to access the data so as to perform some sort of an operation on it, right? So again, in our blog post, we have given example and bit of explanation also, right? So let's jump over to our Jupyter notebook and try to replicate them, and let's discuss it. Okay, fine. So as we remember, we have to import pandas as PD. Now PD is a convention, and in this example we will also be importing Numpy, because we will be creating data frame from Numpy arrange function, right? So let us create it, because in a way it will be faster. So np dot arrange function, and maybe we will take maybe 20 objects, right? So let us create the 20 objects first. Now it will create a one-dimensional array, as we know arrange will do that. So we will reshape it. We'll reshape the entire np.arrange. Now as there are 20 objects in it, so we can go for maybe, you see, 4 columns, 4 rows and 5 columns, something of that sort, right? And it will reshape the entire data frame, right? Entire nd array. So now we can create a data frame out of this. So how do we do that? pd dot data frame, right? So in that data frame, this will be our data object, right? And now if we want, we can just simply display it, or we can just add columns. So how many columns are there? 5 columns. So we can just write columns is equal to, we have to provide 5 individual values to it, and we will give index values basically for the rows. Again, it will be a list. So how many rows do we have? We have 4 rows. So, and we'll close it, close the data frame. So I guess it will work. Let's print it. So now we can see that our data frame has been created. Now let me reiterate what we have actually done in here. So we could have loaded the value from some other CSV file or somewhere around there, but for the sake of convenience, what we have done, we have created an nd array using arrange function offered by Numpy, right? And this nd array will contain 20 values in it, 20 integers to be precise. But as a data frame is a 2-dimensional object, so we are reshaping this 1-dimensional nd array using the reshape function into 4 rows and 5 columns, right? And then we have provided names of the columns, because we do know that if we don't provide the names, then everything will the numbers of column will start from 0 onwards, and the row will also start from 0 onwards. So we'll have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it will not make sense, right, for the explanation purpose. So that's why we have added column indexes, and index argument stands for rows names. So r1, r2, r3, right? So this is how an actual data frame has been created, right? So does it make sense? Fine. So now as we have seen earlier, so if I want to print the entire data frame, what we can do, we can just simply write print df, and it will print the entire data frame to us. Does it make sense? Fine. So this is how we can print the entire data frame. Now the next point was to print individual columns, right? So let us see how we can do that. So imagine I want to print this particular column, that is 0, 5, 10, 15, right? So how we can do that? Print within df. So I'll put, because it's an argument and it's a string argument, so we'll put c1. Let's see how it turns out. So as we can see, it is printing that individual column, right? 0, 5, 10, 15, 0, 5, 10 and 15, right? So the row numbers are given. Now if you want, we can print multiple columns also, but we have to provide it a list of lists. Now let us check it how it's being done. So print df. So within the list, we'll provide another list of arguments. So c1, suppose I want to print C1 and C3 maybe, right? So I want to get the value of C1, that value of all the elements in column C1 and in column C3. Does it make sense? And then we'll put C3. Let's see how it turns out. So as we can see, again C1 and C3 has been obtained. Does it make sense? So this is how we can print columns in it. So this example was given where we can print a single column, or if we want we can print multiple columns, right? So this was the idea. Now accessing individual elements. So in the first example we accessed the entire data frame, then we showed how to access individual columns. Now we can also access individual elements in it, right? So imagine I want to access this particular value, okay, 10. So now we have to understand, as in Excel or in anywhere, to access individual element, every individual element has a column number and row number. So using that argument, that is column value and row value, we can access it, right? So similar example is being given here, right? So we can use two approach using two indexes, right? The first is the column and then is the row. We can use that approach, right? Column label and then row label, we can use that, or we can also use column label and row label provided. Now this will only work if some sort of a column label has been provided. If the default values are used like 0, 1, 2, 3, in that scenario it's not going to work. So let's see how it's being done. So what we have to access 10. Now as we can understand, it is in column C1 and row R3. So we are going to do that, print. So df is our data frame. Within it we will pass the column, so it is C1 and the row is, what is the row value? R3, right? So we'll pass R3 and let's execute. So as usual, we obtain 10, that is this particular element, right? So another way that is given in an example that we can do is print df dot, which was the column C1, right? And within, after that, within this C1 column, then we can use square brackets and the row number. Now row, what was the row? It was R3, right? As usual, we can obtain the similar value, right? But as I mentioned, it's gonna only work if we have column indexes, we have column names. Now if the column names are not there, columns are accessed via numbers, default numbers, names that are being provided while we create data frame, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, something of that sort, then it's not going to work. Does it make sense? Okay, so this was about accessing individual elements. Now this part is the most important one, the subset of a data frame, because at certain times it's not that we are going to use a individual data or maybe a column. What we do, we get a subset from that data and perform some sort of an operation, right? So there are two methods that can be used. Now one is a LOC and another is ILOC, when we have integer indexes for rows and columns. But LOC method is very much versatile and it always works. Now let's see the basic syntax of it. So we have the data frame object, obviously, from which we are going to get the subset of the data, right? And then we have the LOC. Then we will start with square brackets. Now the first argument is for this particular thing is for our row, and then we have for column. So as we have seen in for loops and everywhere, now we have a start value, right, an end value and some sort of a step value, jump value, right? We have already seen it during our different kind of loops and iterations, right? We'll put the starting row number and the end row number, and if you want to, you see, stride or jump over particular rows, then we will put any value in it, else we'll just leave it because by default it is 1, right? The similar behavior goes for column also, right? So let us see how it works. So imagine this is my data frame. I'll just print the data frame again just for the convenience. Yeah, so this is our data frame. So imagine I just want this particular thing 0, 0, 1 and 5, 6. This particular 4 element, which is a subset of df, we want to obtain it. So obviously first what we are going to do, we'll identify what columns and what rows it belongs to, right? So it belongs to row R1 to R2, right? Let's try and do that. And column is C1 to C2. So print, we'll name the data frame, which is df dot loc within square bracket. First is a row index, right? So we'll pass it r1 colon r2. Now we are not going to jump over rows, right? So we don't actually need to provide a step value. So we'll just leave it as it is, and then we'll pass the column values. What are the column values? C1 and C2. Let's see what's the behavior in here, right? So as we can see, we have obtained our target, right? Now if it would have been an numeric indexes, in place of C1 it would have been 0 1 2 3 or this kind of numbers, then we could have used ILOC. And still, if we have indexes, number column names, then also LOC will work. Does it make sense? And this is how we can access different subset of a data frame. Now this thing applies over strides also. So suppose I want column C1, C3 and C5 and row R1 and R3. In that scenario, we are going to use step values, right? So let us check it. So suppose I want the step value to be 2. That is, it's gonna jump every other row and every other column. 3, right? Sorry, not 3, 2. Now let's see what happens. So obviously, because we are choosing up to R2, it's not going to work. So we will choose up to R4. Let's see. And then we will choose up to C5. That is the entire data frame. As we can see, it's jumping over the alternate. So 0, 2 and 4, 0, 2 and 4, and 0 and 10, 0 and 10, 2 and 12, and 4 and 14, 4 and 14. So that is how it works, right? This is an example of striding. Now again, we have seen during our iteration over different kind of inbuilt data structures using our for loop and everything, that okay, you see, we can just simply, when we are referring the entire data set, we don't have to actually refer all the columns and all the rows, right? Even if we leave it blank, it's still gonna work, right? Even if I don't provide any particular value and just provide the step values, still we'll get the same output, right? There won't be any changes. Does it make sense? So this was all about accessing data from a data frame. So here different examples have been given. You see 1 3. Now here we have row numbers as compared to row names, right? R1 R2 we have numbers, right? Now so we can see it also, LOC function also works with the numbers. So we don't actually need to study about ILOC, but ILOC also behaves in a similar fashion, right? So these are certain examples. Now go through the blog post and I hope it will make sense.